This tax was clearly conveyed as one that would provide additional and enhanced public safety programming. Given the statements by the state auditor and the city's independent auditor, its structural deficit meant one clear thing: the city of Henry could not afford the level of services it provided. The city promoted the actions that it would take to add new and enhanced resources, yet the city was unable to provide for the status quo in 2015 and 2016 without the use of reserves. This key issue, which was clearly conveyed in the budget documents and the CAFRs, was not a part of the public discussion. This dilemma has manifested into a complex situation: the promising of additional personnel and upstaffing, while ignoring the fact that the city could not afford the levels of service it provided in 2016. So moving forward, the council should recognize that this problem will lead to questions from the public about expectations versus reality, which I think we already started to hear about when members of the public spoke during public comment. And I've included, just for the sake of presentation, the purple highlighted section that references this statement in the CAFR, which was submitted to the mayor and the city council. I can't see the date, it's too far from here, but I believe it probably would have been 2018. So with that being said, that wraps up my budget presentation for the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Our departments, our divisions are available to answer any questions should the city council have any. And thank you.
Okay, thank you for walking us through that, the city manager. Deputy City Clerk, I know we have some speaker requests. We've already taken electronic comments on this earlier, but we do have some speaker requests.
Yes, Mayor. There are 3 requests to speak from those attending in person. First is Deborah Wandell. After Deborah is Phil Maggio.
Welcome, Deborah. Just pull that microphone down and make sure the little green light is on if it's not.
It is.
Okay. And you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I am very grateful for this education tonight. I'm a retired educator. I retired in 2015. And I live on Park Hill. My house backs up into Park Hill. I've lived here since 1994. And I'm a 10th-generation Californian. We go back many, many years. I love this town. It's been my home. I'm concerned about the feeling of not feeling safe. I've talked to many of my neighbors and many people in the community that are talking about either moving away, some of them moving to the other side of town because of the issue with the fireworks, more than one, even as recent as today, has talked to me about that. I'm amazed at all of the hard work that you are all doing. I had to learn to have a budget of 1/3 of my pay cut when I retired, and so it's difficult. I understand. You have some really tough decisions to make, and with the COVID and all of that, it's been very difficult. So I appreciate all of your hard work. I lost my business with a friend of mine to COVID as an after-school program. When it closed, the children went home and the parents lost their jobs too and went home to be with their kids. I have an idea. I don't know how you could take it, but I'm 67 years old, but I'm still kicking and I still have things to do with my life. I have this hand, I have this hand. You have a wealth of knowledge. in this community of older people that are sitting at home and afraid. They're afraid because they don't feel secure in their homes. And the thought of having to cut either police officers or having to cut firefighters is unimaginable for them. I have people in my neighborhood, in my cul-de-sac, they're in their 80s that I kind of keep an eye out for. And we really need a community to come together. One of the ways that they come together, and I heard the gentleman earlier say, is that they pray, and I believe strongly in that. But they come together in a group of older people that could do volunteer work, that could feel that they actually have a buy-in to this community to do something positive, to do something that's going to create change. And I have two hands, and I would be happy for you to contact me and for me to do the volunteer service that I have. I only have the tools from being an educator, but you can train me, and you can certainly train anybody that we can come across, anybody that we can pull together to do some of the hard things that you don't have time to do because you're busy doing the really tough tasks. So I would ask you to really consider the idea of putting forth some kind of community service or announcements or something to incite the older people in this community to create a group that is going to buy into and help this community. And I really wanted to just say, and I'm closing soon, just really wanted to say thank you for all of this hard work. I know asking you, I came in here wanting to ask you to, hey, why don't you guys take a third of your pay cut and then see how it feels to lose a job, to lose all of these things. But as I see what you're doing now, I just am very appreciative of the fact that you listen when people say, I can't stay in my house because I'm up all night listening to fireworks. I can't do anything to volunteer, to work because I have to feed my kids. I'm frustrated. We have a lot of frustration. But I know when people come together and prayerfully come together to work together, that they can make great changes. And that's what I want for Hemet and San Jacinto, for this valley. So
Deborah, I'm sorry your time expired about a minute ago, but thank you for your comments. Thank you for offering suggestions. And thank you for your patience and waiting to get back to this.
It's
have a
the
chance to share
titanium
your
hips.
thoughts.
I could stand for that long. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I was informed that the other two that have submitted requests to speak are no longer here.
Okay. All right. Again, Deborah, thank you for your patience, and I guess it didn't matter if you went a little bit over because the other people left. They weren't quite as patient. Good night. Okay. Okay, so again, thank you for the staff report, and it's our turn. Who wants to start? Sure.
I'd be happy to. Thanks for putting this together. But again, I'm gonna say what I've said in years past, is that I have yet to see any innovation as to creating additional revenue coming into this city. I'm seeing cuts made to community development, and economic development, and no effort is being put into making this city a place where people want to open businesses and want to build more houses and get it done in a manner that is productive, because when it comes to business owners and developers, time is money. And I continue to see our staff take a long time to get things done when it comes to development. Whether it be through a development project or getting a business to be able to open up and get their tenant improvements completed. It just seems to take forever because we don't have the proper staff in place, or we need to outsource to get it done quickly. But there's no effort and there's no innovation put into how can we open our arms wide and say, we're open for business, bring your business here, we'll be happy to have you, and we'll get you started and open for business faster than San Jacinto or faster than Menifee, because if it takes a year to get something through here, and other cities can do it in 6 months, guess where they're going to go? If I can get it done in 6 months, I'm going to San Jacinto if they can do it. I'm going to go to Menifee. And there are competitors. Why do you think Sears is going out of business? Because Amazon was innovative, and Amazon innovated and put them out of business. And that's what's going to happen to Emmett. We continue to make all these cuts, which some are necessary, but we're not investing in the departments and the divisions that need the investment so that Emmett can grow and be innovative. And I think I've said this at the last 3 budget workshops for the last 3 years that I've been on council. So thanks for putting this together, Chris. Thanks for not being $5 million in the red. I think the department heads for working hard to make sure that we're in the black, but I think that we're not putting the money, investing the money into places. Measure U, I don't recall seeing in the resolution that we have to maintain a fund balance or carry over a fund balance every year. The money was, the measure was passed so that we can add boots on the ground for public safety, and we just take it over. Especially what's going on. I know, Chief, you guys are both chiefs. Your guys are worked. They're worked hard, especially the last couple weeks with everything that's going on nationwide. And then we have all these people call in and say they want to defund the police department or public safety. Okay, well, next time you say, man, there's never a cop when you need one. Well, guess what? There'll never be a cop when you need one. And so, the easiest way, the police department, their job is to enforce the law. If the guys in men and women in Sacramento would stop passing 500 or 5,000 laws every year, they wouldn't have any laws to enforce. So stop electing the people that want to overregulate and overburden California.
Everything.
He just said it's the same thing he's been saying for the last 3 budgets.
We need to be innovative. We need to figure out a way to get people that want to come and build or open a business here through the process in a very timely manner. If we can get if somebody comes into City Hall and says, I want to open the business, this is the location I want to put it there, if we can get them through the process in less than a month, that means they're open for business and people are spending money and they're bringing in tax revenue. Especially if other cities can get it done, why can't we? It just seems to be.
For as long as I can remember.
Why is our city staff not innovative? I think we have some very talented people that work for the city of Emmett that are probably not being either listened to, heard, or just.
Well, I have a couple of just broad, overarching items related to that. I think I'm either your 10th or your 13th city manager in the last 10 years. That constant turnover doesn't necessarily breed the type of stability that individuals want that will be investing in the community. That's not necessarily what they want. I can say that we have a new community development director. As a matter of fact, I met with a individual that was looking to expand. I won't say what business it is, but it's a pretty significant business in our community. Met with them, I think it was Monday. I don't know if it was Thursday. I'm pretty sure it was Monday. Met with them on Monday. They wanted to know what they needed to do to get set up. Had community development there. We've got a follow-up meeting on Thursday where we're going to provide them the timeline of when they need to submit all of their items to make sure that they're able to open up in the time frame that they have. And so I think I've spoken to you in particular as well as the rest of the council members. Whenever there's someone, whether it be a developer or anybody else, I need to be able to know about it, and I need to know who they are. I know that you referenced an individual that had my cell phone number, but just never called me. So I reached out to him, and I basically said, "Hey, I'm hearing you're having issues. You never reached out to me, but what is it?" And we set up a conversation. We set up a phone call, and we were able to straighten out those things. Whenever those items come up, I obviously need to be in the loop on it. I make my cell phone available to anybody and everybody. And so I field calls from residents, I field calls from business owners, I field calls from whoever needs to talk to the city manager. And so that's the type of customer service that I lead by, and it's the same type of emphasis that I expect from the rest of my team. So I know that there's, just broadly speaking, there's always room for improvements. And I think by some of the items that we've included here, including consolidating engineering into City Hall and consolidating engineering into Public Works, I think that will achieve some of the items that you're harping on and some of the items that you have issues with, because I completely agree with you that that's the only way that we're going to grow our economy. Just in terms of a couple items, in terms of actual numbers, in fiscal year 16-17, our sales tax was approximately $11.7 million in actual revenues. In fiscal year 18-19, that sales tax figure, and this doesn't include Measure U, jumped up to $12.5 million. So you're talking about nearly a $1 million increase just in the course of a couple years, which I think really emphasizes the growth that we've seen in our economy.
A lot plays with consumer confidence and the fact that the economy was booming.
Correct. And so obviously with COVID-19, that's having an impact. But whatever it is, whatever those items are, I think we had a good conversation prior to COVID-19 with our local businesses in the chamber to talk about what we could do to assist new businesses come through the process. I think the other side of that becomes, really rallying the council collectively around what is it that the priorities are for the city of Hemet as a body. The council provides those policy ideals, that framework, and we really execute it. And I think in the absence of that, we're pulled in a lot of different directions. I'm not making excuses, but I think that will help rally the rest of the departments around what it is that we're trying to do. Unfortunately, with COVID, all those sessions or the plan to have that open discussion got put on hold. But I can tell you that we've had some subsequent conversations with the facilitator, and we're looking at July to get that started and up and running again, so that we can really delve into those details that the council really needs to be a leader in, and I think really wants to be a leader in, and providing the direction for the city moving forward.
One of the things, and I thank you for having to step in, but you really shouldn't have to, because the issues should be able to be dealt with at a lower level than having to call the city manager, because you're tasked with so much more to do. Our staff needs to be empowered to be able to make good decisions and get people to a yes, and getting them to open their businesses and getting their projects built and getting them done quickly, because time is money for them. And so if somebody has to wait an extra month to get on something, on a project, that's a month worth of time lost, and not just for them, but for the city. So I think that's something that needs to be a priority, and that will help with some of our revenue issues.
I agree
Fine.
too.
Oh, you agree too? Just first off, could you tell me again how many positions are shifting from streets division to water?
So I don't know if Tim's there. He could probably comment on that, but I should note that that's the budget proposal. There are some meet and confer items with respect to that proposal that we need to rectify. If that meet and confer process is not successful and the union is not okay with that transfer, then those individuals will be subject to reductions in force. Tim, can you provide some specifics on that, please?
Sure. Honorable Mayor, members of council, what we're proposing to do, again, in the event that the bargaining unit concurs through the meet and confer process, is shift, call it a construction team, from streets to assist with our water distribution operators. So it'd be 4 individuals, a lead worker, and 3 maintenance worker 2s. In addition to that, we're looking to shift to sewer, 3 members, and then we also are proposing to shift a member or 2 from streets to storm drains. We've already accommodated 1 shift, and so we'll be altogether shifting about 8 employees out of the streets function to the other 3 functions.
Tim, did you hear that question? How many positions are left in the streets operation?
We would have the streets supervisor and a lead worker, a maintenance worker 2, and then we'd have the 2 rocks employees that would be splitting their time between Measure U activities and streets.
So the streets division, can you just provide some clarification as to what their duties currently are? What do they maintain? I mean, I know it's streets, but what does it include?
Well, the potential ramifications of the shift would basically preclude us from doing a subsizable amount of preventative pavement management. In addition to that, I would expect that uplifted sidewalks, curb ramps that may be damaged, as well as other functions of the construction crew would either be deferred or we would not be able to do them. So basically what you'd end up with is a streets crew that would be primarily focusing on pothole repairs and then picking up debris that's left in the right-of-way.
I have a question about that. So how would our risk management group that just took over like the fact that we are not taking care of raised sidewalks? Or maybe our attorney will like that.
Yeah.
So this issue is one that, again, was really born out of the fact of deficit spending. And so instead of having a gradual, we'll call it transition to this, it's an immediate change right now. That's the best that I can do. The other funding source, we've utilized gas tax for that. The other option would be to fund it using general fund dollars. But unfortunately, the general fund side of our operation is pretty grim. And so the only reality is either general fund or some other funding source, and I know that there's challenges all the way around.
So out of Public Works, those that maintain not necessarily the construction of the streets and such, but maintain the city trees and the debris around, it's gotten pretty bad out there in the city. Go down Latham and Devonshire, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And even as far as it's all over the place. So I understand the cuts that have to be made or the shifting over, but if we can't maintain the city and keep it at least reasonably attractive to those going through the city, we're not going to have anybody coming here. And it's gotten to the point where, you know, I think you can excuse some of the things, but, and I know, you know, everybody's taxed. I mean, there's no question about it. And, you know, when we were looking and talking about budget in January, we weren't foreseeing by any means what we're having to deal with now. Matter of fact, revenues were up. You know, our finance director gave us, you know, some really positive reports, and which caused us to make some of the decisions that we made there, thinking that it was okay to do that. And now here we are. And I know that everybody's feeling the same pain, but somehow we got to get things cleaned up. So I really, I worry about not having enough people on the street to take care of, even reasonably, what needs to be done. That's all I have to say now, but I have other questions for later.
Okay. Linda?
I do have a couple questions, and going through in the general fund, the expenses by department, because my major question is the $1.675 million for the city attorney. When we're going with the JPIA, that should be reducing all of our legal costs. So the city attorney is extremely high, and all of our liability insurance is like doubling per department. Why?
So, Lorena, if you could comment on the workers' compensation part. The city attorney one.
Well, this isn't workers' comp. This is liability insurance.
So I can talk about the attorney one
Okay.
before she's able to talk. We're in the middle of a transition with the JPIA.
Right.
So any new cases as of July 1, 2020 will go to the JPIA to determine which legal firm from their list of individual attorneys will represent the city.
Right.
So that allocation would just be directed towards the attorney through the JPIA versus BWS. It wouldn't necessarily, the dollar amount may not change. It may just be allocated to a different law firm based on whatever law firm that the JPIA has in their wheelhouse and on the bench. So the amount that we've plugged in for the litigation potentially assumes kind of the same trend that we've seen with some adjustments that we've projected out moving forward. Now, I can also say, too, that with respect to LCW, who was overseeing our personnel and labor support, that at one time was coordinated and done by BWS. We haven't asked for an additional allocation for LCW to do that work because it's essentially the funding that's been allocated to the legal fund to do that work. However we program it is basically how we've been able to bring on LCW for the attorney. So moving forward, it may not be BWS that gets the allocation of the attorney services. It may be another firm. But I'll let Lorena talk about the liability item for the council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So on the liability fund, one of the biggest things that stands out to me without going back and reviewing everything that I have is that over the last 2 years, we've used fund balance out of the liability fund to close our gap. And this year, we're not doing that. This year, we're charging the departments the full amount of what they would have had to pay in the prior years. And so that's why you see an increase in the liability fund, not because there was really an increase in cost, but because that savings last year, or for 1920 and 1819, was plugged in just on the general fund side. So where you see that increase on the general fund side, you don't see it on the non-general fund departments.
Okay, so with this being more in line with actual cost, is this also at the same time building up that fund balance and for the liability insurance?
At this point, it's not.
Okay, all righty.
And as far as the city attorney fund, it's called the city attorney fund, and I think it's a little bit misleading. I think as things are starting to change, and we've brought on board LCW, that it's really, and we may need to look at changing the name of the fund to be a legal services fund, because it's no longer going to be dedicated only to Burke Williams Sorensen. Their retention will be in there for the general services that they provide, but any litigation items that we have to account for in a trust fund through the JPIA, we would still want to track them in the legal services fund so that we know what those costs are, as well as the LCW contract, so that we know what those legal services are. So really it's no longer dedicated to Burke Williams Sorensen specifically, but more for legal services.
Okay, all righty. Those are my two big questions for right now. I've also got more when we get into all of this stuff.
Okay, if I could just coattail on that
Sure.
topic while we're on it. So if you're going to be tracking the legal services, would you also be tracking which department they're associated with, separating them out that way?
We always track them, but not. We use the tracking of those expenses to allocate out the cost. We don't use it to charge the PD a specific amount, or fire a specific amount, or water a specific amount. We spread out the retainer as a percentage of total budget. So the departments that have a bigger piece of the pie pay a bigger piece of the retention.
And I guess what I'm getting at, and maybe JPIA this would be a component of their work when it comes to risk management. So if you're seeing trends or something like that, based on departments, so that we would have that input and have the ability to address it through training or whatever might need to be done. So as long as there's some visibility there, not so much necessarily to account it fiscally to one department. Right. I'm looking at the proactive side of it.
Finance has tracked it for years. The problem is we've not had a truly active risk management program in the city. So as we move toward the JPIA and working with their risk management staff, then we can share that information with them and show historically where we've been, so that they can guide us on where we need training and where our areas of opportunity are.
Thank you. Carly, your turn.
All right, I have a list here, so I don't feel that you need to respond to every single one right away, because I need to get all these out. First of all, the Measure U, you referred to Measure U as like a one-time fund, and it's a 10-year fund of $10 million. So if managed properly, it should effectively do what we intended it to do. And if our entire goal is to not act chicken, but to put our money where our mouth is and make a difference in our community, I'm sure that that's what our intention was, that like many other cities who passed a 1% sales tax that is forever, that is an option if we do what we said we will do. So I think that we need to keep that in mind. Now, granted, yes, we have gone through COVID, but this is an unprecedented event. Like Russ said earlier, in our nation, it was a government shutdown, and it's going to be a turn on, just as we've seen in the media in the last week. The numbers of unemployment are going down drastically, right? Record-breaking, because this isn't some economic slowdown that we are going to be recovering from. It's going to be a little bit quicker than that. So your numbers are good, and I appreciate all the cuts that you did, and it's always good to go through and be more efficient, right, in everything that we're doing. I would say, and you mentioned this in your staff report, as we go through this year, there's going to be continual adjustments, because I am confident that we will have way more income than what is presented here. But at the same time, when I hear you say things like, we don't want, when someone leaves the police or fire department, we're not going to refill that position, then we are not sticking to the resolution again that we have for funded positions. Why are we going to vote on funded positions? Because when I go to sleep at night, I need to know that Eddie's not going to just pull a fast one and say, man, fundraiser, we're going to just have half the staff tonight, and woo, look at that. I want to buy something, and he's going to bank the money, when we are all thinking that what we voted on is in fact going to be put into place. We have a reasonable expectation, right, to think that that is going to happen. So we need to keep all that in mind and keep our priorities where we said they were going to be, and make sure that, I mean, we have no way of checking. We only can trust that they're doing what we ask until you find out something different. And sometimes I feel that our priorities up here are changed by the time we walk out the door, and we can't have that. I want to echo what everybody else has said about the community development department. I get the most complaints on that department, and you always intervene and make everything right. But like Mike said, that's not the point. You can't be every department head, right? You've got to have like everybody doing their spot, doing their job. You clarified the reduction in volunteers for the library, so we're not reducing volunteers, we're reducing their costs, right? So the other thing is, I'm going to check these off as I go, because if you have any that pertain to these, just jump in. The other item on the library is the library security, and that took my dollar. Yeah, the little guy that sits out there with the little fedora hat and that made proposals to me, they're definitely, because I'm not like somebody that puts off warm fuzzy feelings, I can't imagine what he does to other people, and that's scary. We funded security at the library through CDBG, right? Yes, we did. $24,000 or $26,000. So that's excellence. Yeah. Okay, just making sure. That makes you feel better.
Yeah, I should have clarified on the general fund side.
Okay. Because that's scary. No.
It's scary. Security.
Yeah.
I knew we took care of that.
Definitely. The trash, the parks. If people are going to come into our town and look around, it's going to just take bringing a balance. And we may be lean this month, but maybe next month it won't be so lean. Or moving forward, each month is going to have to be a re-evaluation. But time flies by, and so it's going to be very, you're going to be juggling a lot. And so that's the part where it's going to be real important for you to have a team around you that is constantly looking at everything that we're talking about in there, not the things that you guys want, right? Yes. Okay, so, and then I always have to go here, and I'm so sorry, but we have our JPIA in place. The city of Corona hired an in-house attorney. So pay somebody $250,000, $300,000, and you'd have to get the information from them, but they have up to a certain amount that this person deals with. And then it goes to, and so instead of paying our monthly retainer fee, we have somebody right at our fingertips that we can do many things with if we can hire the right person.
Gets paid the same amount whether they're going to court or not.
Yes, good point. I think that we always are scared to make change in this area, but this is a major cost, and it's on the backs of everybody else's. It's on the backs of the people in our community who have to look around and view the cuts that we made up here, right? Okay. I am concerned that we only have one HPD investigator. We had a series of issues maybe you were here, maybe you weren't, but we've got crime that happens here. And if we only have one investigator, I believe that's both Measure U and general fund is only one. That's scary. That's not solving crimes. And I know you guys are good, but, you know, they got to sleep sometime. So, I have a few more, and I'm sorry, but okay. I am still fighting about about our medic station that we have out on the east end of Hemet, because I don't know any other city that has a whole station just to have a medic unit, and that was a promise for Measure U, which it was convenient that if you look at our funded positions, we kept those captain's positions in Measure U, even though we put them in Measure U when we opened up that fire station. Now we're taking them out of the general fund. So who's playing bait and switch with the Measure U money? And I'm going in the order of sensitivity because these are just getting more sensitive as we go. And this is a rhetorical question that you can maybe answer at some point. How many raises and promotions are happening during all these cuts? Because I see many. And history has to speak for itself. The city councils before us have made cuts without balance. They've made cuts to positions that we're still dealing with today. So we have rundown facilities because of cuts that were made in, I don't even know what year, way before me. They also promoted people. They would let go of or retire out the more expensive people. This is a common practice, right, to save money. And then in lieu, we have an unexperienced person running different departments as far as, you know, whatever that could be. And so I hate to see unqualified people get pushed up the ladder, because then it comes back to customer service. It comes back to our developers. It comes back to the complaints and the needs that are not being met when the people come in City Hall. We've done this before. So we need to bring in probably a more balanced something, plan for this. And I didn't make this agenda, so I hate to have to talk about all these things, but I don't know that I have any other place to talk about them. I'm definitely not okay with the HR, finance, IT position, the deputy city manager position. If I were an employee and I had to imagine going into HR with this new organization, I could imagine what I would hear when I went in the door, because I've heard it here in these meetings over and over for 4 years. I don't have time to do that right now. And that's not okay. It's not acceptable for our employees. I think that our finance department is taxed. They are at the hilt. I mean, we are on the investment committee, and we were written up by the PUN group for not having our general accounting principles and handbooks in place. Are those done?
No, we don't have the staffing to do it.
So lumping more is just going to create a bigger problem. So we've got to be able to figure out a balance. And some things are going to cost more, but some things are worth it. Just bringing in a balance, and I'm not saying you need to add $10 million back to the budget, but we've got to weigh this out. And we've done this too many times.
I think on that too, I think I spoke to Councilmember Cooper this morning. I can't sustain the number of direct reports that I have that directly report to me. I think I've got 12 people that directly report to me, and I'm just running with from meeting to meeting to meeting, and so the number of individuals that I'm managing, directly overseeing, whether it's departments, divisions, is it's quite frankly just unsustainable on my side. So.
And I understand, because you work your tail off, and there's no doubt about it. It shows.
And this is exactly why it's not your responsibility to be able to have to field complaints from people that aren't getting stuff done that should be getting done.
The other side too, I think you've had constant turnover in the city manager role. The staff that we have here on the E team, I think is, we've got some new folks on the team that are working alongside some more veteran members of the team. I think the key becomes with any sort of group of individuals is making sure that everyone's working collectively in the same direction. And I think we're starting to build that, and I think we're starting to create that synergies between our operations. But maybe healing isn't the right word to include, but there were just some battles that our divisions and our departments went through over the course of years. And what they had to go through with the, city manager X, city manager Y, city manager Z, in the course of the last few years has been it's taken a toll on them. And so I can't imagine the toll that it's taken on our employees. They've had the lack of consistent leadership there. And with that being said, I think I've shared this in individual conversations with the council, but I made it a point to speak to every single division and every single department to convey the issues related to COVID-19 and the things that were coming. And I have to tell you, those were difficult conversations to have with our employees. I don't think that our employees are accustomed to that. They're not accustomed to having management come, whether it be the city manager, come and talk to them about what they could expect moving forward. I think that's probably new to a lot of folks, but that should be the expectation. And so I agree that, oftentimes I'm having to intervene and really, get things squared away. And part of that is holding my department heads accountable to ensure that that's what I expect. I don't expect me to have to come to the rescue and figure this out. That's what I expect my department heads to do. And so I think everyone is kind of evolving and developing that concept, and we're moving in that direction. But they've had a lack of leadership in this role for years, and that's going to take some time to develop, which part of what we're going to be doing with the council strategic planning workshop is also doing some work, team building with the executive team, because just as much as we need to build those bridges, we need to work collaboratively. I was really impressed with my conversations with the fire department personnel and the police department personnel when I talked to them, that they were extremely interested in the economic development activity that was going on in our community. I've made it a point, and I specifically remember talking to our police personnel, I want to be able to provide to them the information related to who provides and what businesses provide the sales tax dollars to our community that help keep our department afloat. There was a clear desire on their part to get that information. And I think collectively, if we all understand why we're all here and understand who makes it all possible, which is obviously our small businesses, our businesses in the community, if we can frame that conversation around that, and really, I think the council really wanted to get to that with the MOUs and really have them buy into the growth of our economy leading to the growth of whether it's personnel or pay, whatever it is. I think those are the types of connections that we need to make collectively across the agency, and we're working towards that, but that takes time. So I can appreciate all the things that every one of you have brought up. I think those are symptoms of some issues that have gone on for a number of years.
And I have a few more on here. And I understand what you're saying, but I would even be more inclined to seeing you get an assistant or somebody that did /HR, or if you want IT to be in there too, so that there's just one more person in there. Because trying to combine right now what you already have, I don't think it's going to work.
So part of what we've done is we've downgraded the HR division manager, and we've added an HR analyst.
You can't talk me into it. So
well, no. I just want to explain what's going on. Prior to the analysts that we have on board right now, we had a clear need, I think, as the council has identified, for an individual that can deal with benefits. which for many reasons that we've talked about. We have a clear need for an individual to be involved with personnel and labor relations. That is a gap that currently exists. So with the downgrading of the HR division manager, I held interviews for the second HR analyst, and that's what I'm looking for, someone that has that. So when we talk about the gaps that exist, these gaps have existed for, I'd say, probably over a decade. And so now we're rebuilding that to kind of fill in those gaps as they are. One of the things that we didn't talk about that I think is core to what we're doing here is rebuilding what I call the foundation of the organization, which I think is rooted in the administrative capacity to do the things that we need, which includes, the city clerk function and moving into the types of things that we need to be doing, moving into the 2020 year. Part of that also includes the HR component, because if you don't have a good group of HR staff that's there, I think that lends itself to some of the issues that we've seen over the last few years. And so my hope is my plan is that that's what we're doing to help fill in those gaps. I wish they happened more faster than the reality of how we're able to move on it. But those are just some of the things that are happening behind the scenes and the gaps that I've identified that we're trying to fill in and make happen.
With all these things, I just want you to see where our heart's at and where our priorities are, and come back with, I know this is our first one, but to maybe come back with some ideas on how to make these kinds of things happen. And lastly, since we removed the fire engine from the medic station now, that fulfills the need for the extra engine, and that order needs to be canceled. That's $900,000. And I know you're going to tell me that you can't do it. You can take back anything. We live still in America. I'm sure that whether we paid for it or not, whether it's built or not, that needs to be returned, and that's something that we need to talk about. If we only needed one right now, then we've got it. Otherwise, open that station back up to respond to fires. So it's $900,000 more, and if we are in dire straits, then let's put our money where our mouth is. That's what we've got to think about. And as far as layoffs, Linda already went over all that, but hopefully we don't have to do any layoffs.
We're approaching 10 o'clock, so we need to get them. You already had a turn. I'm just saying it before Bonnie does, that it's almost 10 o'clock. And we need...
I have one quick question and then I'm done.
Okay.
And my question is for Captain Proust. Oh my God!
I know that's the
Look,
second
I just
time.
saved us some money.
Good evening, Council.
Oh, I'm so
I didn't
sorry.
see that in the budget proposal.
Chief.
That is not the budget proposal.
I'm sorry you
That
didn't
is
break
not
it
in
to
the
him.
budget proposal, Linda. That is our chief.
I knew I shouldn't have let you talk.
Oh, it's late. This gets into how you staff, because as Carly brought up in looking at the police budget, or the funded positions, and having one investigator, and knowing the abundance of possible challenges that we have. In this budget, you have the funded positions, and Chris, you have to listen to this too, because it's going to come back on you. Are you going to stop internal testing and promotions of people who want to advance? And if you do that, have you put enough cushion in your budget that you can still fill these positions that are in the budget right now? I have concern you're too lean, is what my concern is.
Well, as of right now, with the cuts I had to do, that's 24.6 positions total. So Right now, every position is filled in the department, so you wouldn't see any promotions unless somebody retired.
Okay, but it's not off the books of testing and making sure that our people are still learning and still self-fulfilling their role as law enforcement. I mean, if somebody moves out of town, okay, somebody leaves, it'll be, you can do your internal thing and you can still hire from the outside. I mean, I have issues with not being able to hire people.
Well, that's up to the discussion with getting that $532,000 that we're taking from the Measure U fund balance. I would love to fill those positions. We're working on COVID-19 general fund. I know that talking to their finance director as well as the city manager, that's going to be reviewed on a monthly basis to see how those finances improve. And from there, those discussions will be made to decide, are we going to backfill those positions? I would love to backfill those positions. We just had an officer leave out of state and unable to fill that position due to the positions I had to unfund.
Okay.
So that's where we're at right now. When it comes to our investigators, so everybody's well aware of, we have one investigator position. Those positions are different than our detectives, and those are positions that can be held during their whole career.
Okay.
Detectives, we have a 5-year turnover where we assign them for a 5-year term, and we'll bring somebody else in. It's a learning position. We wanted to keep somebody in there with the training and the knowledge that they have for a long duration, because that's where our new detectives that come into our bureau will learn. And we currently have a total of 6 investigators. That includes a sergeant and a corporal in our investigation bureau. So we do have the people there. Obviously, we had with our Measure U proposals to fill those other investigator positions, but I had to unfund the 2 Measure U investigators as well as the general fund investigators, which was 2, so a total of 4.
Okay. All right. And I don't know how you do the staffing and everything, but it kind of makes you kind of cringe on the inside when you look at something like this. And I can understand the population or the people that were calling in and saying, are you guys out of your mind? And not necessarily realizing that we carry more people on the books than what we actually have employed. But in the budget process, you have to set that money aside because that position is there. It's not like the real world that I came from, where you can hire and move and do whatever you want, and you don't always have to go down this path and say, well, if I'm going to hire 6 people this year, I have to put that cost in the budget right now so that it's very transparent that this is going to be spent, even though it may not ever get spent. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I think Lonnie had a follow-up question.
Wait, don't move, Chief. So if the officer who left, and that was a funded position, why is it not now funded?
Not
Unfunded now.
so I can meet my budget for the 2020-21 fiscal year.
It's the exact same of why I don't have a fire engine.
So this is the concept that I laid out in the budget. We're utilizing fund balance for Measure U to ensure that we don't further reduce our public safety. We wanted to prioritize our public safety personnel and ensure that there's fund balance available for them to pull from.
Right.
The police department has a greater amount of fund balance available to pull from, so you'll note it's about 5 times as high as the fire department. And so if we're pulling about $500,000 of fund balance, we anticipate that in a few years, if we don't get them off of that fund balance, we will be just drawing down from that
Right, and not have anything.
and have nothing. So what I think we're probably looking at a couple of retirements or individuals that leave the agency that we can pull from once those individuals leave, we pull those individuals from drawing from fund balance and plug them back into the general fund funding source. And then I think the conversation really develops into, as we're tracking our revenues for Measure U in the general fund,